Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to address one of the little pieces of nonsense that are out there, and let's turn it into a learning experience. And I'm actually going to show me ramping up and doing warm-ups as I discuss this, because it's one of the criticisms that people have leveled against me over something I've said before, and I've said numerous times, and that's that warm-ups do not help prevent injuries, right? And I'm talking about lifting. Warming up when you train, when you lift, doesn't help prevent injuries. And in different sports, that's actually a subject of major controversy, even in various sports. But as far as lifting goes, I have not seen one single shred of evidence that it helps prevent injuries. And in fact, every single person who I've seen have a catastrophic injury oftentimes preached warm-ups. They were big on warm-ups. I have seen many people out there, many lifters and bodybuilders and everyone else who preach warm-ups, 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 who still had major injuries that had to be repaired with surgery, right? And then some people will say things like, well, no one's going to ever test that. No, but people can collect data. And it's been looked at, and it doesn't actually appear to be the case. So when you say something like that, people extrapolate, and they get this absurd idea that when you say that warm-ups don't help prevent injuries, that it means the same thing as you shouldn't do warm-ups, right? Yet what do you guys see me doing? You guys see me ramping up on work sets. Multiple ramp-ups when I'm going heavy, right? Multiple ramp-ups. Am I doing it to prevent injuries? No, I'm doing it to titrate up to a max. I'm doing it to see where my strength is and work upwards. And the other thing to think about here is that warm-ups make you stronger. So it's really absurd to take a useful tool like warm-ups, right? A useful tool like warm-ups, and for someone who says, hey, they serve a valuable tool, a valuable purpose, they just don't serve this purpose that a lot of people think they do, that again, people will extrapolate that to mean that you're anti-warm-up, right? When I'm not, I do warm-ups. I do warm-ups every workout. I think warm-ups need to be done in a way that enhances the performance of your workout, though, meaning they shouldn't be particularly fatiguing. Now, why do we do warm-ups? Warm-ups get us into our groove. They help get our mobility and stuff a little bit on point. They get the motor pattern down. They prime the peripheral nervous system to get ready to lift heavier weights and to perform better. In fact, if you were to just come in and sometimes try to hit a max cold, right? Let's not even get into rep work. Let's talk about lifting heavy, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about lifting heavy. Because usually that's what people worry about getting hurt, which is ironic because that's not always the case. I've seen far more guys get hurt when doing 8-rep extended sets or 10-rep to failure sets than I've seen get hurt hitting maxes, other than barring competition lifts. Like, people doing training maxes actually get hurt at a relatively low rate who actually are in shape. But I digress over to the point. If, let's say that your current competition max squat is 500 pounds. If you walk in and try to hit 500 cold, you're probably going to fail it, right? Even if you have built up to where you think you're ready to hit a new max. Let's say you hit 500 at a competition, right? And you think that your strength is high enough to do 510 now, and you want to test it in the gym. You will find that if you just walk in cold, even if your real max is probably 510 and you try to get under 500 cold, and by cold, I don't mean temperature, right? That's also a misnomer. It's about warming joints, temperature. We don't mean temperature. We mean movement patterns. We mean movement patterns. We don't mean physical warmth as in the temperature. We mean getting the movement pattern down, getting into your groove, practicing the movement. Practicing contracting harder. It primes the movement pattern and it primes the nervous system to lift heavier. So you might come in and do, 225 for a single, or 135 for a couple reps, and 225, then 315, then 405, then 455, then 475, right? As you ramp up, you get into the groove. You get into the groove of hitting the movement. And as you get into the groove of hitting the movement, you get better with each practice rep, particularly if you haven't hit a heavy single in a week or so. You need that warm up to perform maximally. You need that warm up to perform maximally. So if you come in and you attempt that lift, you might need to get all those and then hit 495 and then hit your 510. And if you're strong enough to get the 510, you have a good chance of getting it at that point. But if you were to just come in cold right off the street, throw on your lifting short and lifting shoes and your belt, and you walk under and you were to walk right under 500 on that same day, you very well might bomb it. You might miss the movement pattern. You might get too much forward lean. Something can go wrong because you're not in practice with the movement, and you'll probably miss it. The same thing can be said of doing even some like 8 rep sets to close to failure. If you do a little bit of warming up first, you perform better. You can usually handle a heavier weight. In other words, let's say that you're going to work with a weight. Let's say 225 is your 10 rep max on a lift. That's your absolute all-out grinding max, and you want to come in and do 3 sets of 8 with it. And you don't do any warm-up first. You walk in cold. You might find that first set of 8 is difficult. Like you might find the weight moves really slow. It might feel really heavy, even though a 10 rep max is not a heavy weight. Not a heavy weight. Trying to do 8 on your first set, it might feel really fatiguing. In fact, you might even hit failure by rep 7 or 8. Because that first set is priming the nervous system. It's getting the movement pattern down. And you might actually find if you did it that way, you might fail on rep 7, but now you're warmed up from that, and then you go get a second set and you actually manage to get 8. And then you manage to hit 8 again on your third set. But you might actually fall short on the first one if you do it cold, and it's because your nervous system hasn't been primed. And what happens? You end up getting less total workload. You get less quality reps and less total tonnage out of that workout as a result of doing it. And it's not because you were too fatigued. It's because you came in cold and the first set kind of got wasted. That first set primes you to do the real work, and you find that you weren't able to complete it. That can actually happen pretty easily. So we warm up to improve the performance of the workout, to get better tonnage, to get better movement patterns, right? That's why we do it. Now, the interesting thing, the more in shape you are on an exercise, the less warming up you need. And I recall Jamie Lewis says this, and I've heard him say this before. Jamie Lewis said that as an athlete, you're not in shape if you can't walk into a gym in blue jeans and your street clothes and just deadlift 500 pounds. Just walk right in off the street and do it immediately. That you're not in shape. Now, some people would be like, I can't even deadlift 500 pounds. Well, Jamie Lewis would argue that you're weak and not in shape then. Now, keep in mind, that's a guy who competes at under 200 pounds. So it's not like he's a monstrously huge big guy either. But he's also deadlifted like 670 in the 181. But that's an example, and he says that. And there is a degree of truth to what he's saying there. Granted, Jamie's an extreme person, and that's a very extreme example. But there's a degree of truth to that. There's a degree of truth to that. And anyone who's done Bulgarian training knows what I'm talking about. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about, and this is something Bulgarian trainers learn. You don't need many warm-ups. In fact, warm-ups hurt you at a certain point, and it's because if you squat 6 days a week, 5, 6, 7 days a week with heavy singles, you're so used to doing squats that you can damn near come in cold and hit maxes. But it's because your mobility is high because you did it 24 hours ago. You retained some of that peak. And so a lot of Bulgarian lifters, there are guys who literally come in and do 2 singles to warm up, and then they hit their training max. And people who do Bulgarian long enough, their training max is sometimes within 1 to 2% of their competition max. In other words, if they get to where they are hitting 500 every single day on the Bulgarian system over squats, that person might actually only go 505, 510 in competition if they've been doing it for a while. Because what turns out is that your fully hyped up competition max ends up being really close to your daily max when you've been doing it for so long that it becomes the norm. And oftentimes some of those people only do 2 singles to warm up. They literally come in and do like a 135, a 405, and then hit 500. Right? There are people who do that. Watch what Chris Duffin did when he did his 800 squat every day. He did a 200, a 600, then an 800. Bam, done. So that is what they do, but it's also because you are kind of warmed up all the time, but they're still doing some warm-ups. No, they're not coming in and hitting 500 cold. They're still doing a couple of ramp-ups. But they don't need as many because they have their system primed to do that movement heavy every single day. So that's a little bit different of an animal. But it's because they're in a perpetual state of being semi-warmed up. They have the movement pattern down, and they're used to doing it all the time. So that's a little bit different, but that's also food for thought with it. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.